Oh, my camera's faced the other way.
So fun. Oh my God, you look so beautiful.
Thank you. When does that ever happen? I've never joined a call where I've just been facing.
Listen, it is Mercury retrograde, so like all bets are off. Basically,
Okay.
basically all bets are off.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great. The shot is perfect.
Yeah, I'm sitting in front of our like curtain backdrop. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm so excited. So for those of you who are joining us or watching this on replay, my name is Nitika Chopra. I'm the founder of Chronicon, and I am here with Clary Chambers, who is the founder of Spark Clarity. And I am so, so, so thrilled because Clary and I have been in communication since Chronicon Live happened in 2019. And
Yes.
yeah, and I'm just so thrilled because I feel like I've definitely thought about collaborating and working with you, and I know you've been interested in collaborating and working with us, and
Yes.
it just happened to be the perfect time. Last week on our call with Komal, or our convo with Komal, she mentioned you when you joined the live, and it was so fun, and I had already been thinking about reaching out to you. So I'm so happy that we're chatting today, and
Me
thank
too.
you so much for taking the time.
Oh, of course. I've been looking forward to this all day. And yeah, that was just so fun when you realize how big and the world is and how small it is at the same time. I'm really grateful to be able to be here and also to lend my voice to this Chroniconvo to support the Chronicon official, the Instagram channel, but the movement at large that you're doing, it's incredible. I'm so happy and honored to be here.
Thank you so much, Clary.
You're
And
welcome.
can you just tell our audience a little bit about what has you be a part of the Chronicon community? Like a little bit about your story?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Clary Chambers, and I use the pronouns she and her. And I'm a proud Black queer woman. And I also happen to have an invisible illness and an invisible disability. I have fibromyalgia, and I've had fibromyalgia since I was 17, but wasn't diagnosed until 7 years later. And so I'm 27 now, and my invisible disability is I'm dyslexic. So there's a lot of things going on there. I find that often folks who refer to themselves as spoonies, that idea that we have limited spoons for energy as people with chronic illness, can relate to having a few different things going on in their lives. And
Absolutely.
another thing, and how I got connected with you, Nitika, and Chronicon and everything is because I have my own business called Spark Clarity. And at Spark Clarity, we have the magnanimous mission to create a world in which folks like us and like many of the people watching live and on the replay who have an invisible illness or have an invisible disability are celebrated for their adversity and not discriminated against because of it. And with that, that's a huge undertaking, right?
You like took a deep breath for all of us. Like, yes, please, can we have that mission come to full life and have everybody
Oh, yeah,
hire
totally.
you and all of that? Because you go into companies and actually help companies achieve that goal, right? Or even individuals who might be entrepreneurs just like myself, right?
Yeah, definitely. I totally do. So I work with organizations, individuals, companies, basically anyone who has autonomy to create a change in their space, which I believe is everyone. But
Totally.
with working with businesses, and the reason why, thinking about businesses, organizations, or entrepreneurs is because I felt like, where can I make the biggest change? And so, as I mentioned, I create resources for folks like us with invisible illnesses, but then I go into those businesses, whether physical or now virtual land for everything. And I help them create more inclusive and accessible spaces. And we look at their cultural, digital, and physical spaces. And we start there. What can we do?
Yeah. I mean, I love that so much. And I think it's such an interesting time to be having this conversation. I don't know if you feel this at all, but I know for me, I kind of feel like with everything that's happening in the world, and especially in our country right now, I sort of feel like I have been telling people that they needed to care about our experience and care about the chronically ill for as
Yeah.
long as I can remember. And now I feel like people are starting to actually listen to that. Do you find that there has been a shift in your ability to reach people and have them understand how important it is over the last several months?
Oh yeah. And I was even saying, we've had conversations too, just us chatting. And I feel like really before the pandemic, like it's literally feels like PC, like pre-COVID, post,
Yeah.
before that, I felt like I really had to challenge folks to think outside of themselves and to see why it mattered. Like, why does it matter to make your space more inclusive for folks with invisible illnesses? Are there even any people with an invisible illness or an invisible disability? There are.
Yes.
Millions of people in our world, in our communities. And yeah, I feel like the shift is there. And I think the shift is there because for the first time ever, globally, I should say in our lifetimes, right? We're going to have this collective experience. Everyone's going through it. Everyone is isolated to some degree. Like everyone, like if you're watching this live right now, we've been isolated and we've seen what it looks like to not be able to do the things we want to do at the time we want to do them, when we want to do them. There's barriers. There's all these extra steps we have to take. That's the life and reality every day of folks with invisible illnesses and invisible disabilities, moment to moment. So having like a taste of like, this is really challenging. This might be the biggest source of adversity that some folks have ever faced in their lives. And so they're like, damn. And you're just like, yeah.
Is this what you were talking about all those years that you were telling me that having a chronic illness and being inside all the time and being in your bed all the time is really hard? Like, yeah, this is exactly what I was talking about.
Back when folks would say stuff like, I feel like those one-off comments like, oh, well, it must be really nice to like, I wish I had some days off, or like, oh, that must be great for you to do, and then we see the pandemic hits and everyone's like, I will not sit with myself. I will learn to make banana bread. Like, don't even at me. Like, I don't have free time. They're like, I'm a baker now.
So, such a good point. I didn't even think about that, about all the people that just really didn't get it when, especially for me, like in my story, I was bedridden for many years because of my arthritis. And so, I just remember people did not really understand the gravity and the intensity of what it is like to not be able to leave your home. And I know so many people in our community deal with that. And you mentioned something I kind of want to touch on a little bit and go back to. You just mentioned that you often had to kind of tell people like why this is even important.
Yes.
I know our community might seem like, duh, we know why this is important. But I also think that it would be really nice to hear like some of the things that you share with some of those clients or potential clients, because I think a lot of times we are trying to have those conversations about like, hey, I happen to have a disability, or I happen to be chronically ill. I need you to care about this. And sometimes it's really hard to get people to understand that. So first of all, I just want to read this comment, such truer comments. I never made the relationship between COVID and invisible illness. Yes, it's so real. And so I'd love, Clary, for you to just, if I was a potential client and you were talking to me about making my company more inclusive and accessible and really understanding the needs of the people who might be disabled or chronically ill, what are some of the things that you would say to me so that I understood why it was so important? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. And so, in that, and I appreciate the folks who are putting in their comments and sharing their experiences as well. When we're looking at this is my true belief, and I believe it's true. So I'll share it with all of you, and I think your folks, everyone watching, will think so too. So I believe right now, in the way that it sits, our world is not set up for folks with invisible illnesses and invisible disabilities to thrive. And we see that coming up with this pandemic in who are the most at risk. And so we see that that is also, we are up there. Anyone who is autoimmune compromised or has, any accessibility features, like, you are at risk. And so we are not seeing folks with invisible illnesses and invisible disabilities in executive leadership. We are not seeing folks that look like us in those positions. And so what does that do? It leaves us with that energy, those thoughts, those opinions, and that creativity that we have as people who live with invisible illnesses. And stick with me on this. Every single person who lives and thrives every day with an invisible illness or an invisible disability is mega creative. I mean, like, if we're talking about creativity in like a small jar, we're just bursting it open. Why? Because you have to come up with creative solutions to thrive every step of your day. How are you going to, be at this group event where they don't have, accessible entrances? What about the lighting that's triggering for folks who have traumatic brain injuries? What about the fact that there's no variety in food? And so folks who have dietary, send some hearts if you got some dietary restrictions. We do. And so we're missing out on this creativity. Imagine if I could take all this creativity that I have as a Black queer woman who lives with an invisible illness and invisible disability and put that into a workplace, no matter what that workplace is, we just be popping off with ideas. There'd be no barriers, like nothing. Yes, exactly. We're problem solvers. And so that creative potential is not there. We are not seeing it in our governments. We are not seeing it in our environmental activism. We are not seeing it in our schools. We're not seeing it in our homes. Like, it's not there. So that's what I tell the people who are like, okay, I'm intrigued. This sounds interesting. Yes, I can see that, we're not inclusive or we're not having those ideas. But what if, instead of just surviving in the space, what if you went to the grocery store and it wasn't the most triggering experience for you? And what if you could then take that energy you use to problem solve, to bring, maybe you have headphones so that the sensory overload isn't there, all those things you did, all those things you brought with you so that you could be in that space. What if instead you could just use that creative potential and just put out your ideas, put out everything there? So when I'm talking with a client or anyone who's excited or intrigued about, okay, this sounds interesting. Yeah, I could see, that's what I say. And they're like, oh, okay, well, that sounds like we need that. We want to be creative. We want to be innovative. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? You probably already have some folks with invisible illnesses and invisible disabilities in your space right now. And you don't even need to go search it. Like, they are there. We just need the spaces to be set up better. And I truly believe with the way the world is right now, who's to say that moving forward, it can't be like that? It's like everything feels up for discussion. How we live, how we work, how we play, how we parent, even how we learn. Like, think about schools. It's all up for discussion. They're like, well, what are we going to do?
Yes. And I so love the way that you describe that. First of all, as a person who has been navigating working, since I was about 25, 26 is when I was able to even get my first job, because I couldn't stand long enough to have a job. I couldn't function enough to have a job when my arthritis and psoriasis were so bad. But even that, I remember, was such a huge hurdle for me. And I always felt like all those things that you just described about how innovative and creative we are, I always felt that I had shame around them, honestly. They weren't the way that you're describing them. Like, I love that, not just for the people who might have companies that, didn't think of it that way, but also for those people watching that might have these really creative, amazing ways that they have to, all of those things that you mentioned, I feel like I had a touch point of, like, whether it was the food or people not knowing that I have arthritis and like needing me to walk a certain amount when I was in real estate, and like all of these different things, and not knowing that I was really struggling.
Yes.
I just always felt like so much more shame around those things and the ways that I was creative about them, because I felt so different and othered and not like everybody else, versus the way that you're describing it, which is, honey, I am so creative. Like, you have no idea how creative. If I have a psoriasis, like, I am a ninja with these things, and I just figure things out that you would have no idea, and I have mastered the art of doing that. Yeah, so personally, I really love that reframe. It's super, super empowering.
Yeah. And I appreciate you also sharing your experience on that, because I'm speaking from my own experience at, living with fibromyalgia, living with an invisible disability, but also from my experience of doing all of these things without any acknowledgement that it was happening. Because I was hiding the pain I was in. I was hiding all of these resources that I was bringing with me. Like my toolbox is like, people talk about toolboxes in terms of mental health a lot, like what's in your toolbox. And if my toolbox was a real toolbox, like I would need like, the wagons you see kids in all the movies. Like I need that plus like put a trailer.
Like a motorized toolbox because I would not be able to carry it.
we got like the supersized version of toolboxes here.
Yeah.
And so we think that the way in which we have to, because of that reframe is from our perspective, because I want folks to feel empowered, that we are not powerless in the face of invisible illness and invisible disability, because we are not, but the world outside tells us that we are.
Yeah.
And having to do all these extra steps, and that's what I'm talking about. That's the creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's like, there's probably no problem that somebody will present you with, Nitika, that you're just going to be like, I got nothing for that, because you are the master problem solver. You're like, how am I going to, achieve my dreams, my goals? How am I going to get through this day, this week? Like, how am I going to do this? But you're going to be able to figure that out because you've shown yourself that you have the power to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the power to do it. Everyone who's watching, you do. You truly do.
I love that so much, Clary. And I think it is so empowering, and it really like warms my heart and comforts me because
good.
Because I think that that's so much of why we have Chronicon, to take this conversation around chronic illness that has been such a negative one,
Yes.
And it's such a conversation of these are all the things that put you in this isolated, othered box. But the way that you just reframed it really feels like this is actually like a superpower in a lot of ways, and the ways that we've had to adapt and, go throughout our lives. So I think that's incredible. And I want to talk about two things. So in that same vein, I want to talk about, one of the things that you and I spoke about recently is following your dreams when you have a chronic illness. And so, when we're talking about all of these things about how we can sort of adapt to the situations that we're in, or in different business situations or companies, like that's really empowering. But I also know that there are a lot of people watching who, want to break out on their own, or want to actually feel like they can do the things that they've always dreamed of doing. And especially right now, with so much happening and so much changing, I know for me, it's been mentally, it's definitely been like so much, and I've had to really work on my mental health and all of that throughout this last few months. So what do you say to those people in terms of how to really follow your dreams when you have a chronic illness?
Which is like, how do you follow your dreams? Yeah, small question. Oh, that's, and that's amazing. Just that thought of like, how do you follow your dreams when you have a chronic illness? Because if you are, and like, I think this is such a layered question, and I have a beautiful response. So here it comes. When we think about our lives and like who we are, that intersectionality of it, which means, the different aspects of who we are. So my intersections are being a Black woman, then being a woman, then being a queer woman, and then a disabled, woman, and an ill woman, and like it all. And these are all the different things that I come across. But all of those layered pieces make us who we are. And when we look to the world, because even now I look out and I can see myself through this video, but usually we don't see ourselves unless we have a mirror. And so we're looking for that mirrored reflection in the world. We're trying to see, this is me. Who else am I seeing that's like that? And those are like those subconscious things. Totally. And so I did not see a Black queer woman that has a disability, that has an illness. I didn't see that. And so I'm trying to picture myself. What am I going to do in my life? Like, who am I going to become? What do I want to be when I grow up? And I was thinking, whatever I do, it's going to be in an office. And that was my thoughts. But then I was in my car accident in 2010, and I couldn't sit longer than 20 minutes at a time. I had no idea there was options of standing desks. There's no standing desks in movies. Like, you don't see everybody in a cubicle. Like, how would I know that?
Yep.
And so I just said to myself, that's it. Every dream you've had is canceled. You can't work in those environments. You can't sit longer than 20 minutes. Noise, lots of sensory noise is a trigger to you. You're in pain 24/7. Just cancel that. Like, what are you going to do? And so I worked 16 jobs in a span of 8 years because like yourself, I couldn't find anything that worked for my body. So when we talk about following our dreams, it's sometimes you have to be what you want to see, right? And I really hope that everyone who watches this doesn't believe that just because you haven't seen anyone that looks like you, that needs to eat the food that you eat, use the supportive devices that you use, has different medical apparatuses depending on who you are and what you look like, doesn't mean it can't happen. But I'm telling you, it's going to look different. And you got to own that. You got to own the self-care that it takes for you to show up for all the things that I had to do so that I could be here today, so that I could sit and, be my upbeat self. Like, there's a bunch of things I had to do. And folks watching this know all that self-care that you have to do, whether you ignore it and it comes up later or not. That's how you're going to be able to follow your dreams, by owning those things. Like you said, Nitika, the things that you thought made you other, that made you so different, because no one else is doing all these background things. Whether for myself, it's counseling, getting enough sleep, saying no to so many things that I want to do, saying no and saying no to that and saying yes to me. I got to rest. I got to take a Netflix day. I need to move my body even though it hurts, and I need to go for a walk. Like, that's how you're going to follow your dreams, by basically following your heart and trusting your gut. What you need, and that's how you're going to be able to do it. I think in a short version.
Yes. No, we're getting so much love in the comments. People are really just resonating with what you're saying, Clary. And I honestly feel like you're just talking to me right now. I know this is for everyone, but I really feel like there is so much of this that I personally resonate with. And the part that you're saying about, it's hard to take that step when you don't see yourself mirrored in the world and, in the industry, or doing the things that maybe bring you joy or whatever it may be. I don't know why. I just thought of like Misty Copeland, like being like this beautiful black ballerina, and, just like things like that bring you so much joy. I feel like it's really hard to then get the courage to take that leap. And I feel like that's a lot of what I go through, even just with Chronicon, and just to, keep having the combos and keep doing the things and keep sending out the newsletter and keep doing it, because I know that it's super valuable and important to me in my life. But when you don't see that, and you don't see, huge corporations doing it, or you don't see these like multi-million-dollar grants being given to, that kind of a conversation, it can feel like you're sort of screaming into thin air sometimes,
Oh my goodness.
So
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Oh, you're so welcome. I saw a comment just now. It says, I love the light in your faces when you talk about your self-care and joy. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
So
and
sweet.
That reminds me, at this point, I wanted to offer to anyone watching this right now, I have a guide that's called 7 Ways to Find More Joy this season. And if anybody's interested in that free guide, just send me a DM at Spark Clarity after this, or like, even if it comes through Chronicon Official, I'm sure we can get that over. And it's just a link, and then you can have the guide, because that just reminded me the joy. Yeah. Oh, there is so much sadness. There's so much pain. There's so much negativity, as we said at the start, when it comes to being ill. There's so much shame. To be not sick is seen, similar when we're speaking to, issues of racism, where whiteness is seen to be, neutral. So not being sick, that's neutral. And everything outside of it's like, it's like, that's so much shame, especially being a young person. And in your life and in your experience from your journey, being a sick young person, it's like your fault. Like, oh, you can't be sick. You're so young. Don't be sick. You're young. Like, I had someone say, I said, I have chronic pain. They said, well, being in chronic pain is no way to spend your youth. I'm like, yeah.
Like,
Oh shit. Let me just, oh
I
no.
knew I could just like choose something else today. I might have done that.
Just gonna like,
I
just,
totally get that.
yeah, the
And
wrong.
speaking of your guide, before we move
Yeah.
on to that, I would love to share that. So definitely send us
Okay.
the link for it, and we'll do
Perfect.
everything we can to share it and stuff.
Great.
And you'll be tagged in the description in the
Perfect.
IGTV, so people can DM you through that tag, which is really, really important.
Awesome.
I'm gonna download it too.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to make sure that we touch on. So we've touched
Sure.
on so many great things around, you know, following your dreams when you have a chronic illness. I feel like the last part of what you just said was really about the self-care conversation and making sure that, and I totally resonate with that. I feel like the only way I have been able to do any work in my career is because I had my entire work life with so much nurturing. Like even just saying it, I'm like, you know, I like had the Netflix days, and I get the food that I need, and I do, you know, rest, and I don't take meetings before 10 a.m. and, you know, certain things that are just important for my nervous system in order to be able to function. So I am so there with you on that. And I love all of those points that you brought up. But I also wanted to just sort of leave people with, you know, if you have an organization or a company that you are in, you know, and how we spoke about a little bit earlier about being a part of an organization that needs to be a little bit more inclusive and needs to be, you know, more mindful of folks that might have disabilities or invisible illnesses. What are some things that they can do? Like even just 2 or 3 things that people can make sure that they can implement, or maybe if you're an employee, you can let your employer know, like, okay, this is something that would be really helpful.
Totally. Well, they can hire me. So that would be, they can hire me to do a workshop. I ran this event that went amazing called The Future Includes Us. And it's a webinar. The recording is going to go up soon on the sparkclarity.ca website because I'm in Canada. Yeah. And so that's hence the .ca is what I meant to say. And so through that, we went through like, what do we need to do when we're starting to think about our spaces? Because for a lot of people, it's strictly a blind spot. It's not necessarily that they were like, we are not going to accommodate for people with chronic illnesses. Like, no, we don't want these creative people. Like, it's not what they were thinking. It's just they didn't even think about it at all. And so the 3 things that I would tell people that they need to start doing. So the first one is to reduce shame. And that's what we just were speaking to, in that it is shameful in the way we've set up our world. And even though you and I and everyone watching didn't have a hand in setting up those spaces, we're complicit in keeping those standards, keeping that, you know, Arlen Hamilton, who's a Black queer woman, and she's also a venture capitalist of Backstage Capital. She speaks to, in her book that she just came out with, which is called About Damn Time, she speaks to when we tell folks that they have to stay late, that they must work and keep working and never take a break, we are telling folks with chronic illness not to apply. When we say, I was just like, damn, girl, yes, tell me more in this audiobook.
I literally just felt myself like not applying for 25 jobs when I was a kid. I was like, no, that's not going to be for me. I need something under these specific qualifications.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's that shame. Like, and then instead of being like, oh, you're going home, like, oh, must be nice to, you know, all of those things. We need to think about the language we're using. Are we shaming people for not overworking? Are we shaming people when they take care of themselves? Like, those are the things. So that's one, is reduce shame. The other one is to acknowledge your blind spots. When we start these conversations, I am sure everyone in the world, you know, who's been tuned into the conversations around anti-racism and about health inequality with COVID, what we're seeing, especially in the United States as well, and what communities are affected and, you know, what's happening, we're going to realize there's so many things we're just like, wow, I didn't even realize that. And so remember, reduce shame. Don't let the shame in not knowing something stop you from making any action because you feel so crappy that you just didn't know about these things. Like Maya Angelou says, like, once we know better, we can do better. And the last thing is to start where you are. Start where you are right now. Ask people in your space, just because no one has said there's a problem doesn't mean there isn't one. If you are a business owner or you are an entrepreneur and you run events, and just because no one has said to you that the space doesn't work for you doesn't mean that no one is having an issue. Just because no one has brought up to you that you don't have gender neutral bathrooms, that then make that experience a completely disastrous for folks who identify as trans, non-binary, two-spirit, or just in general, doesn't mean that no one is having a problem with it. And our community is our biggest asset. Our community is our biggest asset. So ask the folks in your community, is there anything else we could do to make the space more inclusive? You're going to get a list. They're going to be like, you know what I really could have used is there's no needle disposals in the bathroom, and I have diabetes and I can't put my needles anywhere. Or, you know, I need a sink in a bathroom private stall because I have list out every, you know, chronic illness because I need to deal with different things. So those are all the things. Those are the three things. So reduce shame, acknowledge our blind spots, and start where you are. That's what I would say. Like, start with those.
So incredibly helpful, honestly.
Okay.
And I hope that when people hear those different things, that they're sort of taking an inventory with where they are, either in their own business and how they run their own business. And maybe if you are a solopreneur, like I know a lot of people who follow us are, you know, maybe a therapist or talent in some way, or, you know, they're freelance or they're on their own. I still think that these things apply. I still think that, you know, as somebody, when I was showing up to a set, like I absolutely think all of these things are things that I could bring to the table when I go to, you know, a different set every day or whatever the situation might be. And I also hope that people are taking inventory if they do have a company. Like while you were saying all of that, I was thinking about Chronicon, and I was just like, okay, where have I experienced that we could have done things differently in this way? Or where have I experienced that I can implement something that I didn't think about? I know last year for Chronicon Live, there were a couple of things that, but even though I've been in the chronic illness community or had a chronic illness for the last 30 years, I still had blind spots. You know, like we wanted to have like an ASL translator at Chronicon, and that was something that I didn't even think about until the end, because I have never had to have an ASL translator. So it was totally a blind spot for me. Yeah. You know, and having compassion. I felt so bad when I realized that, and I was just like, I went to wanting to berate myself for it. And then I was just like, okay, great. I'm so glad I know. I will never forget this ever again. I will make sure that I do differently in the future, you know, all of those things. So I think what you're saying is so important. And I hope people are really taking an inventory, you know, within their own work as well.
Yeah. And it's great that it's I appreciate you sharing that experience too, because that's where that, once you know better, you can do better, because that's the biggest block I see with folks making changes, is that they feel ashamed. How could I not have known that? How could I not have thought of that? But now that you know, you also know that then maybe you need to put out more surveys and just things to ask ahead of time. And we can only do the best that we can until we know better. And then we got to do better, because at that point, you know, we got to figure it out. And that idea of inventory, the Future Includes Us workshop that I did, that's going to also live as a digital product. And most of the Smart Clarity offerings are all on sliding scale. So anywhere from $0 because to upwards of, you know, 200, because we don't want folks to not be able to learn something because of that barrier. I know what that's like. Until this year, I have been on what's called social assistance in Canada. And that was because I was trying to make this business work, but I wasn't, you know, able to. And in the Future Includes Us webinar, we have an audit that comes with it, and it allows you to do locating yourself exercise, where you think about, who am I? What are my lived experiences that I know to be true? And what are the things that I don't know? And who do I want to be in this space in the future? If you look around at your audience, if you look around at your friend group, your community, your family, who's not here? And who do we want to be here in the future? And so let's work backwards. What do I got to do so that this is a safe and inclusive space for the people I so want to have in my space? It takes time, it takes effort, but like, as you're saying, individuals, we can make those changes.
Oh, yeah.
It is possible. We do have the power to make those changes, for sure.
Yeah, and I love that so much. I feel like you read my mind because I was going to say that one of the barriers to a lot of this, like, is being able to afford, the ways to, whether you need to get like your video transcribed and like you don't have the money to do that, or you don't have the, equipment or whatever it might be, right? Like all the different touch points. And I was just going to say that I love the fact that so many of the offerings that Clary has for all of you watching are free, downloadable, on a sliding scale, and you can DM her and just get that support. Get in the conversation. Don't let that be a barrier to why you're not having those conversations. And I think the more we can do that and just really humble ourselves, to feel like this is important. And it's sort of what, I hear talking about in the race conversation, where we talk about like our feelings are not more important than the incredible devastation that's happening in the Black community, right? So it's like our feelings are not what matters in this moment. It's doing what's right by the people that need it for us the most. And I think that's absolutely here too.
Yeah, and it definitely applies anytime. It's that the equity, having the equality of one group does not take away from your own. It never does. There is like, there's enough of that to go around for everyone. And it will be uncomfortable because it's new. And, in this, our conversations, Nitika and I were chatting, and I was just like making so many personal notes, because it just like speaking with you brings up for me so many things about my life. And I think that is because I see myself in you, and I always have since I first came across your platform. And I think that's why so many people are here today, and they've been here with you on your journey, because they see themselves in you. They see the struggle, but they also see the joy. They see the passion, but they also see like the upset, the resiliency, what you and Komal Minhas were speaking to on your last conversation. And so we need everyone here that's, going to watch this at some point, and all of us and all of our circles and our bubbles, we really can see with COVID, with contact tracing, we can see how much that ripple effect, and that can be so impactful when it comes to community, when it comes to making a change, when it comes to being inclusive. If you are inclusive and someone comes into your space and they see that, if they respect you, if they see you as a leader, they're going to do the same thing in their house. They're going to do the same thing in their business. They're going to do the same thing in their community, because it's these small changes, like they make an impact. We know what it feels like to feel kindness. We know what it feels like when somebody is thinking above and beyond for us. We know what that feels like. So that's what we need to do. That's what everyone needs to do. Be that change. Take those small steps.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I see Jill was in these comments saying that she really loved this conversation.
Oh, thank you.
On is how you say that next person as well. And there's just so many beautiful affirmations. And thank you for that affirmation of saying that you see yourself in me, because I feel the same way when I look at you. I really do. And I think it's really like kind of a breakthrough for me just to hear you say it like that, because I don't think that I always have words for it. But like, I'll be looking through Instagram and just be like, yes, this person is amazing. Like, that's, and I definitely felt that way the first time that we came into touch with each other. And and I just think it's so important. And I think it's encouraging to know that there are so many people out there that want to have these conversations, that want to do better, and that you can help them.
Yes, come on over to Spark Clarity Land. We will, as we say, spark clarity for you. We don't say that, but I said it now. So
it's happening right now. Sparking clarity. I love that so much, Clary. Thank you so much. This conversation will be up on our IGTV, and we will be sure to share it everywhere. And
I love that.
Yes, and also Clary will be tagged, as I mentioned, in our description. So be sure to check out her platform, Spark Clarity, and be in her DMs, because she can't wait to hear from you.
Slide in, everyone. Slide in.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And
thank you so much.
Soon.
Sending love to you and everyone. Bye.
Okay.